welcome to another episode of Love Means Business Love Bites Edition, where we indulge in many master courses focused on specific topics in love and business. Today, we're diving into a topic that touches more families than we often realize. Step parents, for better or for worse. In my case, I hope for better, but for other cases, all the Disney movies, it's always for worse. Step parents are just always the villains. So our guest today, and I'm going to try to pronounce her name, Dr. Aurus, is that right?
It's Aurus, but close, close.
I wasn't close at all. That's nice. Dr.
Aurus Sanchez.
Aurus. Oh, that's so
hmm
pretty how you say it. Sanchez. You have a really powerful personal story and a lot of great insights into blended family dynamics. So we're gonna get into that. So welcome. But
Thank you.
before we do that, do you want to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, like what you do, how'd you get into kind of this realm, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. So I'm a DPT, a doctor of physical therapy, and I would also mention that I've had the opportunity to treat many, many children. And as I was treating those children, not only did I have fun with them, but I also learned a lot about them, the kids themselves, their backgrounds, and
Yeah,
a lot of families. And I know that later on we'll be speaking about that. They're in blended families, right? Like there's a
right.
step parent or a stepmom, a stepdad, right? Maybe have siblings, and so much more. You know, people's lives can be very complicated in a good way or in a bad way, right? But I'm not here to judge, but that's just the
Yeah,
reality. So I've been very exposed to blended families that way. Also, me personally, I was raised with a stepfather since the age of 2. I also had a stepmother who came on later on in my life. I also I recently just wrote a book, a children's book called Pepito and the Dangerous Cats. Now, the book is not really about step parents or blended families, but it is about teaching children with the help of a parent about online predators and
yeah,
pedophilia, and how do we speak about a taboo subject in a
right.
way that doesn't break the innocence or the mind of the child. So how do we kind of like teach that in a very educative, efficient way without scarring them, right, from adults in life. So I'm in the beautiful state of Colorado. I love this state, and I just moved here. And so yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what I'll say for now.
Oh, that was amazing. You've done so many exciting things, and I'm happy to jump into this conversation with you. There are so many blended families, and I don't feel like it gets talked about all that much. Like, you do
hmm
see it in movies, but often it's all very, very extreme on one way or the other. So I think today, us being able to talk about it in a very real way,
hmm
from your perspective, and then my only real perspective is because I'm a stepmom.
hmm
I actually grew up when parents are still together, so I never had to deal with that personally, but I do know the complications of being the stepmom. So it's
mm
interesting to have that perspective and kind of hear what you say too. Why don't we go ahead and kind of get into that like personal experience?
hmm
Do you mind, to your comfort level, right? I don't want you to
Okay.
share anything you're uncomfortable with. Can you kind of share your story on how it was growing up in a blended family?
Yeah. So if I had to summarize it, what I would say is this. So my mother divorced my father when I think like around 2.5, 3, and then she went with my stepfather, and they met in college, right? And they got married, and then so my stepfather, I've known him since I was like 2 to 3 years old, and now the beautiful thing is that my father, my biological father, he was always active, he was always there,
Yeah.
right? So he didn't leave or he didn't go to jail or anything like that. He was always there. So then I would see my father like every 2 weeks, or like during the weekend, to have like some shared custody. So that was the dynamic. But also another layer of I think that's interesting in the story is when my mother married my stepfather, and then and then I was raised with them, and I would see
Yeah.
my father on the weekends. My stepdad, he was actually a witness. You know, the people that go knocking on doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so I was raised as that, in a family that was with my stepfather and my mother, and then eventually later on, my father, my biological father, also got involved in that, and he also became a witness. I mean, today I'm not a witness anymore. My father either. My mom and my stepdad still are witnesses. So I think that also adds an interesting dynamic to the
Yeah.
blended family and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah, because that religion, I didn't grow up in that,
Hmm.
but it's very strict, right? And it's very isolating, correct?
Hmm.
Am I wrong or right about that?
So I'm gonna give my own personal experience, and I'm gonna
Let's
say the
hear
good,
experience.
and I'm gonna give
Mhm.
the good and the bad and the ugly.
Yes.
The expression, right? So
Yes.
what I would definitely say, so right, is there is a lot of nice things and beautiful ideas and what are values in it, but the debate that always comes up, especially with this religion, is it a cult or not, right? And there's different answers
Mhm.
to that question if we want to dive into that later. But yes, it
Me
is
too.
a
That's interesting.
yeah,
So,
it is, because some people will
yeah.
say no, they're Christians. Other people will say no, they're not Christians. It's a cult. So what's the reason? Now I have my own answer based on research that I've done, but in reality, yes, it is strict in certain ways, and there is controlling elements
Right.
within that religion, right? When it comes to information, when it comes to certain behaviors, and even thought, right? So yes, it can be very very strict in certain remarks. So yeah.
Okay. So you said you're going to say the good, the bad, ugly, beautiful, everything in
Yes,
between. So
correct.
let's hear some more of good, some of the bad. What
Okay,
are
no
some
problems.
examples?
So for
Yeah.
example, let's start with the good. So I would say it definitely is a religion slash cult that really promotes like community, right?
Okay.
And I'll say this: the reason why a lot of people, or like certain amount of people, I mean, there's only like 9-10 million witnesses in the world, right? But something like, even if you hate witnesses, what people will always say is two things: they're very nice people and they're educated and they're very nice, which is true, because they teach, they teach to be like that. And number two, that they promote community, and it really is a community based a place, religion, cult, right? Where it's
Sure.
like everyone's got each other's back, like we're gonna help each other. And in
Yeah.
today's day, a lot of people don't really feel like they have a sense of purpose or sense of community. Like they don't have that. There are very
Yeah.
few religions that can give. Like Judaism is one of them. The Witnesses is another. Mormonism, right? A lot of people are attracted to these worldviews because of that community base, that family oriented. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful and together. So I would say that's the good. That's
Right.
something good.
Okay. Yep.
Now, what I would say though also is that the religion or that cult, right? It's very strict when it comes to certain things, that if I were to say, for example, so a lot of people would think that's illogical, doesn't make any sense. How's that possible? Like, one of the
Hmm.
teachings is they don't accept blood transfusions. No blood, right? It's better for you to die than to get a blood transfusion. And then whatever, they'll use certain logic with certain biblical texts to really show, like, hey, the Bible says this, so we're not going to do it because this is what God wants. I'm going to do this. Now, I'm not
Hmm.
against that, right? Because I'm in Judaism now, so in the Judaism and in other religions, that is a way of thinking. Like, God told me to do this, so I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but in this case, that is very extreme. Not to take a blood transfusion, and it's
Right.
better for you to die, right? And maybe one of the worst things, I think, is that the cult, the religion, does not promote independent thinking,
Yeah.
right? It does not promote it. If you are someone who questions a lot, or you have doubts, right? I mean, I'm not saying all of them will they're not all going to say you're Satan or Satan has got you. No, but that's not really tolerated, or different
Hmm.
perspectives, right? It's this way or the highway. So it's like, if you try to leave, right, they'll shun you, right?
Yeah.
And then they even teach your whole family cannot speak to you because you're going against the will of God, right? And what's more important, God or the family? It's going to be God, according to them,
Right.
right?
Right.
So even family members will shun you until you come back, right? And there's no independent thinking. It's like, just follow what we have to say. Now, a lot of people in it,
Yeah.
they don't see it, because obviously they're in it and they're invested emotionally and logically. So I would say that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Again, there's a lot more examples, but I just gave you a couple that came to the top of my head.
Well, and I don't know the exact definition of a cult, but what comes to mind for me is what you just said, is if you disagree at all. Like, you're not allowed to disagree, and that's a huge way to control people and keep them from leaving, is the whole shunning thing. Because if all you've ever known is your family, that's a pretty motivating factor to not want to leave that, because like nobody wants to just give up their entire family. That's crazy. Um,
Yeah, and no, 100%. You're right. They
yeah,
say there's this acronym called BITE, BITE, that certain types of psychiatrists and psychologists that study cults, they came up with this BITE. B is for behavior control, I is for intellectual control, no, information control. T is for E is for emotional control, and then T is for like oh wait, I let me see if I have it here. Because I want everyone to, oh, I got it. Yeah, behavioral control, information control, thought control, and
thought
emotional
control.
control, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Interesting. Oh, that's a really good love bite that you just see, because this is love bites.
Yeah.
And you just did an acronym for that. That's pretty cool. Um, okay, so let's get a little bit deeper into like
Okay.
some of the emotional complexity of having a step parent. So just a couple things that come up sometimes with that is there could be a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
There's sometimes resistance, sometimes even combativeness, a little bit with that, and then hopefully you're able to work it out. But in your case,
Hmm.
can you talk a little bit about that? With, I know you shared with me, it was really with your stepfather, I believe, where you had a
Yes.
lot of that resistance and some of the conflict.
Correct. So what I would say is this: if I had to put a objective scale, quote unquote, I would say that my stepfather, out of 100%, like how good was he with me? I would say I would give him a good 70 to 80%, like in that realm. For the
Yeah,
most part, he was good to me and my brother, right? And my brother, that's his actual father, right? So now,
yeah,
but a lot of the resistance did come, that 20 to 30%. Most of it had to do with my biological father. There was a lot
okay,
of resistance since as young as I can remember, until my teenage years, into my young adult years. There was always that resistance, and there was a lot of arguments, and maybe even subconscious jealousy from his part, or like not understanding, because from my mom and stepdad's perspective, I was showing favoritism and I loved my father more than them,
hmm,
right? So a lot of the times my father would come up in conversation, and me at that young age, not being able to handle my emotions well compared to now, right? Or I wasn't thinking so logically, I would always get offended, and I would start an argument, and because I didn't
yeah,
want my father to be attacked, right? If he had nothing to do with anything, they would always bring him up or say something, a sly comment, and I didn't like it. So a lot of that 20-30% was resistance with my father, and I think there was just subconscious jealousy and not understanding me. Like, my stepdad's like, I do everything for this kid. I do
yeah,
everything. I'm here for him. And it is true. He did a lot for me. I can't take that away from him. And he's like, but he loves his dad more, who he barely sees twice a month, and he wants to be with him rather than me and his mother. It doesn't make any sense.
right,
So a
right,
lot of that, and a lot of the communication that I had with my stepdad, there wasn't enough vocabulary or the emotional strength to be honest with me, and vice versa, or for him to speak to me and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling from you. Why, like, what's happening here, and so forth. Yeah.
yeah. That's interesting. I can empathize with your stepdad and how he was feeling a little bit. Just that sometimes when you're the step parent, especially if you have 50-50 custody or more, it sounds like you were with your mom and stepdad more than 50-50.
Mhm.
Is that true? They had
Yeah,
more
I mean,
custody
I
than
think so.
50-50?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so when that's the case, then the step parent, by a lot of definitions, is more involved in the life
Mhm.
of the kid than the biological parent. And I know for me, we're exactly 50-50. So
Mhm.
when we have my stepdaughter, I do everything that a real or biological mom would do. I make her breakfast, I take her to school, I put
Mhm.
her to bed, I do her laundry, I help her with homework, I talk to her about drama at school, like I do all of the things that if you had a list of what does a parent do, I do
Mm-hmm.
all of those things. And I think it can be hard sometimes as a step parent because you want to do those things, you're kind of expected to do those things. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't, then you are like put in the evil villain terrible category. But then on the other hand, sometimes you'll be just cast aside. At least I have felt that way, where it's like, oh, well, thank you for that, but there's my real parents. And it
Ooh.
can be really hard to navigate emotionally. I think if the parent isn't emotionally mature and hasn't really worked on that and realized, like for me, I realized pretty early on it was a trigger and I had to work on it because
Mm-hmm.
it's a kid, right? She's not doing any of that stuff on purpose, right? Like she's not trying to make me feel that way. You aren't trying to make your stepdad feel that way. It's confusing for everyone involved. But I think that's where it can get really hard for step parents,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like there's this expectation to do all these things, even financially. Gosh, like the amount of money you spend, but then you're still not treated like the real parent a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times. And so it can be really complicated. I've been lucky in that my stepdaughter, she doesn't even want me to call her that. She calls me mom. She wants me to call her daughter. Like
Wow, that's
she
beautiful.
love like we have that. But still sometimes I get sensitive because she'll call me Emily instead of mom and I'm like, did I do something wrong? Why are you calling me
Mm.
Emily today? But we talk about it. The communication piece is what I wanted to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it. And like I will ask her, I'll be like, instead of resenting it and being like, oh, she's calling me mom to get something and calling me Emily because she's mad at me, I asked her, I said, how come sometimes you call me Emily and sometimes you call me mom? Is it on purpose or is it just like,
Mm-hmm.
why? I'm curious because I don't understand why. And she literally said she doesn't know. She doesn't think about it. It just like sometimes
Yeah.
it's not on purpose. And when we had that conversation, I was like, oh, okay. So that's my issue then. That's me being sensitive. That's me being worried that she's like, doesn't love me as much or something. But I think when you said you didn't use your words, you and your stepdad didn't have those words, I could see how if you didn't do that on both sides, you could
Mm-hmm.
build up some really deep resentments that could burst one day.
Oh yeah, and I'm just curious, Emily, like, so what age did you become the step? I'm sorry, not you, but when you became her stepmom, how old was she, and what did you do to like fix the your sensitivity or your trigger? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so when I first started dating my now husband, she was only 4. She had just turned 4.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved in together when she was, I don't even know, she had turned 5. We moved in together pretty quickly. So I've asked her, she doesn't remember before me. And I think that's a huge part of it. Like, I'm all that. She doesn't remember anyone he dated before that. She doesn't remember them being together. So I think that's in my favor. I think it's harder if
Mm-hmm.
you're a step parent that steps into a situation where their kids are older. Maybe they're kind of upset that the parents aren't together because they miss that. I don't have to deal with that. She doesn't remember any of that. And I'll be honest, like I still get triggered. It's hard. There are still some days where I get very sad about something that happens because I treat her and I think of her as my daughter. I don't think of her as my stepdaughter because that was the advice I was given by what I call my adopted mom. She's not my adopted mom, but I look at her as like a mom figure.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me, she said, here's my advice to you. She's like, don't think about her like a stepdaughter. Treat her like you had her. In every sense of the word, treat her that way because if you don't, she's going to feel that. She's going to feel like you don't think of her in that way. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I was given another piece of advice by my best friend who's a stepmom. And her mom actually gave her that advice too. So the same person gave us both of this advice. But I said, how do you deal with the custody thing where some days you have them, some days you don't. And it can feel very hard with schedules and stuff. And she said, act like they're there every day. So
Mm.
don't be, oh, yay, we get a day off. Or, oh, you know what I mean? That's
Yes.
honestly, yeah, we get some time to ourselves. Or thank God they're leaving. No, you think about it. She said, treat every day like they're there. That way you don't have the ups and downs and you can create some stability. It's the mindset of, this is my daughter, I love her, and I want to do this for her
Mm.
because she's amazing.
I took notes of everything you said. So yeah. Okay. No, no, it definitely makes a lot of sense with what you're saying. And I think to hit on a point you mentioned that on your favor, it sounds like you became the stepmother when she was like just when she became 5 years old, as what you said.
Yeah, yeah,
And according to my research that I've done, like, and I've read different books with different psychologists, it really is advantageous, like between that newborn to 6 year
sure.
old, right?
Yeah,
Because they don't really remember the past so well. So when you
no,
come, all they really need is consistency and nurture. And if you can give that as the step parent, the stepmama, or the stepfather, and you're there, and you're consistent, and you're good, then you can go over that hurdle. But I think like from 7 to 12, or like that 13 to 18, that's where you see all the loyalty conflicts and
yeah,
the rebellious stage, and like identities, like crisis, like
yeah.
you're not my real father, but you're good. Am I betraying the other parent? And all those
Oh,
things.
yeah.
So, yeah.
That's so complex. And not to mention, like, how did they break up? Like, what if one of the parents cheated and you are the step parent that they cheated with? Oh God, that's complicated. So I didn't have to deal with
Yes.
any of that either. They were like so done, far done,
Hmm.
when we met. So I can only imagine how that would affect the relationships you would have with your stepchildren
Hmm.
if if you were seen as the one that broke up the marriage.
Yeah.
That's that would be really tough. Was that at all with your case? Did
Yes,
you
it
have
was.
oh,
It
okay,
was.
well, there you
Yeah,
go.
it was. It was that my mother, she went to college, and then that's where she met my stepfather, and they
Okay.
started a relationship, sooner or later. But she was still married to my father. But then it was like, then they got divorced, and then she went with him. So yeah. So definitely, that definitely adds another, as you mentioned, layer of complexity to
Yeah.
the psychology of the child and the whole marriage and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean I mean, and rightfully so, not to say that, but I mean I would be angry too if I felt like this person kind of came in and broke my family up. So I
Mm.
think that's where, well, that's a whole nother conversation where I'd say, well, why did you do that? I was like, why did you do that? Like, you shouldn't do that. But
Yeah.
once it's done, then I think where the communication comes in again, it's like, okay, depending on how old the kids are, like, talk to them. Like,
Yeah.
I talk to Rose like she's a person. I know she's a kid, but I like ask her questions and I want her opinion and I want her to know that I care about what she feels. And
Hmm.
I think that's good. Like, whether you're a guy or a girl, girls are a little more emotional. But I think even in your case, if your stepdad and you had like a conversation, totally honest, and he had been
Yes.
like, hey, I'm feeling some tension here. Like, let's talk about like how things started with me and your mom. Let's talk about all of this. Let's just get it out in the open
Yeah.
because I want to have a real good relationship with you. Like, how would that have helped? I feel like it can't hurt.
No, I definitely don't think it would have hurt. I would say that I remember growing up, and like anytime I would ask questions about that, or like my brother, my mom and my stepdad, they were very vague about the
Yeah.
origin story, right? Very vague. Which, listen,
Yeah.
I don't blame them now that I'm older and I understand that there's complex history there, and
Yes.
I'm not here to judge them at all. Now, would it
Right.
have helped? I mean, this all happened when I was two, right? Two, three. So
Right.
maybe later on it would have helped 100%. But maybe I feel like if there was more conversations on like,
Yeah.
hey, I don't hate anyone, or like it's not that I love one more than the other. It's just that, and if we would have delved into those conversations a lot more, I felt like the relationship could have been to a 90, 100%, or a lot better. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that makes a big difference with blended families where I see them and the kids being happy and feeling like supported and all of that, versus it being like where you feel like you're being torn back and forth. It is how you get along with how both sets get along. So like me and my husband, how we get along with his ex-wife and her partner.
Got you.
And whether we like each other or not, that doesn't truly matter. We just have to get along and we don't talk bad about each other. At least that's a policy that we have here. And
Mhm.
I read about that, and that is the worst thing you can do for kids is talk bad about their parent, the other
Yeah.
parent, in front of them, because you're gonna make them stressed out. Because then they do feel like they have to pick. They
Hmm.
feel like they feel bad when they're with you. They feel bad when they're with the others. So it's like, even if we don't agree with stuff, I'm like, okay, let's talk about it behind closed doors. Let's figure it out, and we don't involve the kid in that. It's just
Hmm.
bad.
Well, that's a beautiful policy. I wish
Yeah.
my mother and stepdad did more of that.
Yeah.
My father was very good actually at not doing that. He would always remind me, "That's your mother. You got to respect her."
That's
And
good.
and your stepdad, he is trying to raise you the right way. Like when I would vent to my father, like on the weekends, and I could tell like at times he wanted to say something, but he would stop himself and just keep it at
Yeah.
that. My mom and my stepdad. That's why my stepdad and I got into a lot of arguments because there was maybe at times sly comments or just coming out saying something not so nice about my father, whether he was involved in the conversation or not. So I think as you mentioned, I was stressed out and I reacted, and there was always that
Yeah.
tension because of that.
Well, yeah, you're putting the kid in a no-win situation there, because if they agree with you, then they're betraying their parent. If they don't
Yeah,
agree with you, then they're gonna have to fight with you. Then they're disappointing you. So it's like most kids just want to make people happy, and
yeah.
it just can cause so much stress. So I think that's a big piece of advice that I didn't make up myself. I learned that from research.
Uh-huh.
Because when I first, that was the hardest thing when I first got with Charles. I had to become an instant mom, and I think that's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize when you become a step parent, especially if you've never had your own kids, which I don't have any biological kids.
Hmm.
I went from being single, Miss Independent businesswoman forever and ever and ever
Uh-huh.
to I'm a mom, instant mom, you know, wiping butts, whatever, all the stuff. And I could see how for some people, maybe they're not cut out for that. Maybe they didn't really think about that and didn't prepare for that. And you got to adjust, you got to pivot. And so if you don't want the kid, you can't have the relationship. It is a package deal. And I've always said that you have to be okay with both. You have to love both. You're not just getting the husband or wife, you're getting the kid too.
And I think, yeah, 100, but I also think it depends like what culture you're raised in, right? Some
Yeah.
cultures being a step parent is a no, it's a big no. It's like,
Oh, wow.
why
Okay.
why deal with that when you could just marry someone else and there's so much
Yeah,
fish in the sea and make your own children, right?
for
um
sure. Yeah.
and I definitely understand. I mean, I don't have to agree with it, but
Yeah.
I even remember my stepdad giving me advice. I remember when I was like, once I was like 17, 18, and I'm going out with girls and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and he would tell me. And now that I think about it, like it doesn't sound good, but like I know he didn't mean it in a bad way. But I remember him
Yeah.
telling me like listen, when you want to find the right woman, make sure that she doesn't have a child, no matter what. Don't do that.
Oh, no. He
And
said that to you, I would have been like, that's so you love me, right? Like,
like back then I didn't really pay too much mind to it. I never got it. Now that I'm older, I'm like, wow, like why'd you say that? But like because clearly, from his perspective, he went through a lot, because I was very
yeah.
mischievous and stuff like that with him. But I remember him telling me, so yeah, some cultures this is a big no, and you don't go into that territory. You don't become a step parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So let's talk about like the influence of step parents. We've already
Okay.
kind of broached that subject, but
Yeah.
how can, in your opinion, so how can step parents either become a source of support or contribute to more trauma. So, what are some thoughts you have around that?
So I actually have some quotes here that how
Oh,
step parents
okay.
can and how a step parent can be effective and great, and how a step parent can do the worst, right? And
Okay.
and then I have some quotes here that I found that they were amazing. So if we're looking at the positive first, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
according to the Journal of Marriage and Family in 2001, so it was a while back, it says high quality step parents relationships correlate with higher academic and social success,
Oh, that's
right?
great.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so if children have positive relationship with the stepmom or the stepdad, they show that the kid's gonna have a higher self-esteem. How they behave in classroom, and even how they make friends improves over the long term. The
That's
second one I
awesome.
found is that step parents who take the time to bond first have higher term long respect. So children who don't feel rushed into calling the step parent dad or mom are
Yeah.
more likely to eventually choose to do so voluntarily out of respect and not obligation,
Wow,
right?
that's so that well, that's funny because I never told her to do that with me. She just
Never?
did.
Okay.
No. And I was even like the first few times she did it, I was like, "Oh my god, what do I do?" Cuz I was like, "Well, is that bad?" Cuz I'm like
Uh-huh.
and I asked my husband, I'm like, "Is it like I don't want to be disrespectful. I've always tried to be really respectful to her biological mom."
Yeah, of
But
course.
then on the other hand, I was like, I don't want to tell her to stop because it made my heart melt. I was like, oh, that's so sweet, you know?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Did any other ones? I didn't mean
Yeah.
to
I
stop you.
no no but no no no. I love to hear your positive experience as a stepmom
Yeah.
and Rose. One last one for the positive one is that even if a child, and, we kind of mentioned this, that during a divorce, a separation, or a death, there's a lot of tumultuous events and a lot of instability.
Hmm.
So even according to this, it says even if a child experiences early instability, a warm, consistent step parent can help form a new, secure attachment,
Yeah.
improving emotional regulation and self worth.
Yeah. I think that's and just an example too, like I think having stuff that you do like routine stuff that they can like look forward to with each parent. I know for us like we do sunset walks, we do girls days. Like we have certain things that I like themes probably because I'm in marketing. So I was like, ooh, I'm gonna mold it, you know. But it became our thing, and then we bonded up. We really bonded over that,
Hmm.
and I think that with kids, they need that. They need that thing they can do. And
Hmm.
it also gives them like again that comfort, like you said, that stability because they're like, oh well, I do this with Emily and I do this with my other parent. And then it's like
Yeah.
they don't have to like feel like there's again they're torn. It's clear.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I'm jealous now. I want to be part of those sunset walks now. That sounds
Yeah,
so
the girls'
beautiful.
days are pretty fun too,
That's
but
good.
yeah. You
That's
can
good.
come on a girls' day with us. Just come to Charlotte.
All right, and now for the opposite is about the negative.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now this is from a 1985 article called "The Cinderella Effect," and the
Okay.
fact was that children living with a step parent are 5 to 10 times more likely to suffer physical abuse, and
Hmm.
40 to 100 times more likely to suffer fatal abuse compared to children with two biological parents.
Yikes.
Yes,
That's
and like
scary.
and like the thinking behind it, according to these psychologists, comes from an evolutionary biological perspective, which is that because these are not your biological children, there's
Yeah.
less empathy and there is less connection. So
Yeah.
when the kid does something right, usually a biological parent will say, "Well, that's normal for a child because they're children and they're exploring." But for
Yeah.
the step parent, it's like, "Oh no, they're doing this because they're trying to go against me." Right? So it's kind of like a confirmation bias and like their insecurity, and they then throw it to the kid like, oh, they're just doing this to go against me. So
Yeah.
they're less empathetic because they're not blood. There's no biology together, right?
Yeah. And I think that goes like that's a mindset that we all need to do, whether it's for step kids or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Stop thinking people are doing stuff on purpose. Like
Mm-hmm.
most people, kids are people too. They're just like young people. most people are not doing stuff on purpose, are not doing things to hurt you or get you on purpose.
Hmm.
And especially kids, they're usually like, they're not evolved enough to even do that. But I agree with what you said. And that's something I have to check all the time and not be like, am I being triggered because of that, because I'm sensitive, more sensitive because I'm not her biological parent. But
Hmm.
I think that's again where you need to just recognize the trigger, recognize what you said, and ask questions. Don't jump to conclusions,
Yeah.
because otherwise you are going to end up hurting yourself, hurting the kid, maybe not physically but emotionally, definitely, because you're
Hmm.
going to lash out. So it's like, but I think there is something to that. I mean, I've never birthed a child, but I can imagine you have that bond, that biological bond.
Yeah.
And so I think step parents have to work harder. You're going to have to work harder than biological parents to not do that.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, the mother, if it's your biological child, you're growing it for 9 months, so you feel the baby moving,
Yeah.
or once the baby's out, right? You put it against your chest. You have a lot of bonding moments and a lot of
Yeah.
oxytocin, right? Like all that bonding. You're with the step parent doesn't have that, so you have to build it other ways, like what you were mentioning.
Yeah.
The other last fact about the how a step parent can be a negative force is, according to Dr. Patricia Papert now, she said forcing a child to use a title like dad or mom when
Yeah.
they already have a relationship with the biological parent creates loyalty conflict and internal fragmentation. And then that can lead the child to have confusion with the identity, a lot of anxiety that can lead on into
Yeah.
adolescence and adulthood.
Yeah. I think the same words we keep saying are the stress, the anxiety, conflict, and
Hmm.
anything you can do to minimize that with kids, you should do.
Hmm.
And from a selfish perspective, and this is where I think some people just are not very smart, but it's like, it's better for you too, okay, as the step parent, to not
Uh-huh.
have conflict. So it might be a little extra work to, calm your temper or be more emotionally intelligent. In the long run, it's easier if you have a better relationship with your step kid and the ex or whatever. So that would be what
Hmm.
I would say. The minor discomfort, the minor, hit to your pride or whatever, it is worth it to have the overall better relationship. It's easier for you.
I I 100% agree with you, but I also think that some people won't have this mindset, and I kind of mentioned earlier, is because on how they were raised and what environment they were raised in, what
Yeah.
culture, right? So my family, they're all Hispanic, right, from different Hispanic countries. So in I'm not saying all Hispanic people think this way, but it is very common. There's a phrase that basically, I mean, maybe Americans say this. Well, I've never heard anyone born in America, raised in America, say this, or maybe you have, where it's like the father's not the one. The father is not the one that makes you. The father is the one that raises you, right? I'm translating it, right? So I remember growing up, this was an expression that my mom would say a lot to kind of push me to call my stepdad dad, right? And I
Oh,
eventually did, actually. I eventually did, and then I got used to it, right? But I remember having a lot of conflict. I'm like, I have a dad, and I'm
yeah.
close with him, right? So there was a lot of that, and a lot of times I think in certain communities, like in my case, let's say in Hispanic communities, where being a step parent is very common, actually, very common, right? In certain places it is taboo, but it is common. That thinking is very much like that, because a lot of people, when they divorce, a lot of times the father leaves, or he's not really present. So then when the
Oh, yeah.
stepfather comes in, oh, I'm going to call him dad because he was actually there. He was the one that actually raised me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. For sure.
But
Yeah.
but in my case, my father was always there. But I remember my mom pushing me a lot to call him dad, and so forth. So
Mhm.
I really think it depends on the environment and the culture. They might think the way you think, or maybe they might have a different perspective, even if we agree or not. I just think it's fascinating to see the different thoughts.
I think too, like, from an outsider hearing what you said, I
Hmm.
also feel like with your mom, maybe she wasn't identifying her anger or her issues against your biological father, and I think her pushing you so hard to call your stepdad dad was also maybe partly because of that, maybe she was still not, and it's like that's where again, as the parents, we have a responsibility to we have to try to rise above that stuff. So if
Hmm.
you want to be mad at your ex, you want to be whatever, fine, do that.
Yeah.
But by you can't use kids in it. When you use kids in it, that causes the stress, that causes the conflict, and it will backfire. And I think that I get extra passionate about that because although my parents are not divorced, my whole podcast, my TEDx talk, all of that stuff was about, a lot of it is about all of the issues and all the conflict, all the stuff I went through with my parents.
Mm.
And so they can still be together, but you can choose not to be with them. When you're an adult, you choose who you want in your life.
Hmm.
And so I will say that, like, as a step parent, think about that. They're going to choose eventually, they're going to have the right to choose who they want in their life. So
Yes.
treat them in a way that they'll always want to choose you. And
Mm.
they'll always want to choose you. Treat them that way because even if they're your biological kid, they can eventually choose not to have you in their life if you're not
Correct.
good. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Oh, okay. No, no,
I
no,
don't know.
no. I love
Sidetrack, I
that.
guess. But
You should definitely, you should
yeah.
definitely like write a book one day, like a practical, logical how to got to be to being a step parent, so they choose you every time, something like that.
I mean, yeah, and it's not that you want them to choose you over someone else, but like that's another thing you have to think about. Like, and I've thought about it. Like, what if we got divorced? What if my husband dies?
Mm.
What's gonna happen? I'm so like bonded to my stepdaughter. What if that happens? Like, what if I don't? She's not in my life anymore. And
Mm.
then I think, well, again, but you can't think like that because again, like even if I did birth her, when she turns 18, she could still say, you know what, F you, mom, I don't want to be around you anymore because you did this, this, and leave. So
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, in my opinion, you need to just focus on the relationship with each kid. If it's more than one kid or one kid, focus on that. Focus on that
Mm-hmm.
bond, like you talked about, like they said. And don't worry about titles. Don't worry about any of that stuff. And if they call you mom, great. If they don't, some kids don't kill their biological parents, mom or dad. So it's like they don't. I'm not saying I agree with that either, but focus on love and focus on the bond. What makes you a good parent isn't whether you birthed them or not. It's how you treated them, it's how
Mm-hmm.
they felt growing up, it's feeling loved and supported unconditionally.
And I mean, I that's so true. And if you ever decide to write that book, I'll co-author with you.
Thank you. We've talked about some loyalty conflicts, but what are some other common challenges that you have had? Because
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned some stuff when you turned like what, 18, 19, right? Like didn't you have, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but will you share kind of that really hard time that you had that kind of shaped you
Yeah.
into who you are now?
Yes. So we're talking about what I mentioned about me getting kicked out of the house, correct?
Yes. You said
Yes.
you
Okay.
were
Yes.
homeless, right? For like a little bit or something
Yes.
like that?
I was homeless for
Yeah.
3 days. For 3 days. For
Tell me
3 days. So,
more.
no, not a minute more. Just 3 days. Like I was living. So yeah. Um. So all this took place in New York. I was born and raised in Queens. Yada yada. Right. So what happened? And again, it's so interesting. The catalyst that made this happen, I think about it because I remember it still. It was
Yeah.
such an insignificant, stupid little thing. But what happened was that I remember my stepdad was in the sofa and I was in the computer and he got angry at me because he told me, Aurus, I told you to go throw out the garbage. You didn't throw out the garbage. And I said, yeah, you're right. I'm so sorry. I'll do it soon. Right. And then he kept going back and forward with me a little bit and me too a little bit too. So obviously it's not only him, it was me too. And then now I remember this line. He said this line. Now how he got to that line, I don't remember that. But he said you're just like your father, just like your father. So he said that and that triggered
Yeah.
me. And then I was like, what the hell are you saying? Like, why did you just say that? This has nothing to do
Yeah.
with it. And then we got into a physical fight, right? We did. I mean, it lasted like what 30 seconds, and then my mom separated us. But we got into a physical fight, right? And then she separated us, so then we calmed down. I went up to him and I apologized, and he also apologized too. But then the next week, my mother, my stepdad they gave me the silent treatment. They barely spoke to me for a whole week.
Wow.
Which, by the way, I was actually used to that already. But at that point, and then a week passes, and he tells me, I need to speak with you." I'm like, "Okay, no problem." And I thought we were over this already. So he sits me down, and I remember I was like here. My stepdad was on my right, my mom was on my left, and my brother was on the other side. He was much younger,
Yeah.
right? And then I remember he told me in front of everyone, "Listen, you can't live here anymore. You're gonna have to leave. We can't keep doing this. You got to go. I'm gonna give you a week to get your stuff, and you got to get out." And I remember I wanted to argue, but I was like, you know something, this was gonna happen eventually at some point.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I remember packing my stuff. I called some friends of mine. They came to pick me up, and then they actually dropped me off at my father's house. But my dad lived in this little studio with my stepmom, and there was no space for me. So I felt
Yeah.
bad. So I remember
Yeah.
lying to them, and I said, "Don't worry, I found a place already. Everything's gonna be good." I didn't have a place yet, and then I was sleeping on the trains, on the either the queue with my bags, and I was there for a couple of days, and then eventually my ex girlfriend's mom heard what happened at the time, and then she told me, "Come live with me until you're back on your feet," and this all happened while I was in my last clinical rotation in Brooklyn. So I was
Wow.
in school full time, and all this was happening. It was so much craziness. But thank God I survived it, and we're good. So that was pretty crazy.
If you could give one tip
Mm-hmm.
for step parents and blended families, what is
Mm-hmm.
the one tip you would give to?
Yeah. So be patient. I'm just kidding. No, no.
Okay,
I have a
50's a
yeah.
lot. Let's not do 50.
No, I'm kidding. I mean, I do have a couple. Like for example, I would say I think one of the first things is to earn micro wins. Like the step parent, step mom, or stepdad,
Yeah.
don't, as you mentioned, don't force to be mom or dad because you really aren't, because you're not. Let them come
Right.
to it.
Yeah.
Be Mike, be Emily, be Sarah, whoever you are, be that. And the most important thing, you need to be consistent and be reliable because children, this is what I've learned from a lot of the stuff I've read. Children trust patterns, not promises.
Hmm.
So if you're consistent in their lives and you're stable after a divorce or a death or a separation or something, and you're stable, they eventually will love you for that, and they'll appreciate that either directly or indirectly. So that's one. Another one I would say is there's something called the ask help strategy. Sorry, ask for help strategy. Have you heard of that one?
Mm-mm.
No, it's like the reciprocal technique where it's like you ask, like, let's say the kid for help. It could be on something small, it doesn't matter. "Hey, I need help figuring this out, could you help me out?" So now it
Oh yeah,
reverses.
yeah. Okay.
So then it reverses like the power dynamic, and it makes you vulnerable now, the step parent to be vulnerable, and then uh, it's not like I'm not saying like they're gonna feel like they're in control, but like they're helping you. And when you help someone, right, it helps you create this bond, but also like I
Yeah.
helped them, so clearly I must like them or at least care for them or something, and then you can
Yeah.
build off of that. And then maybe another one I would say is to always catch the stepchild being right. So I mean, a lot of the times you'll say, "Oh, thank you so much for throwing out the garbage," which is great, right? Or like, "Thank you
Right.
for doing this or that." But if you can praise them not only for what they do, but for how they thought or how they showed character, it's like a deeper level that will
Yeah.
get to them, right?
That's really good
Uh,
advice.
so yeah,
Hmm.
I would say a couple of those things, and eventually just find ways to build a connection with them. Do what they like. Just do what they like, even if you don't like it. Get into it, and just be there. Go to their games. If they like video games, play video games with them. Like, be their friend. Like, really be their friend. And eventually it will build that. But don't force anything. Don't force anything.
Yeah. I think that's great. I'm gonna say this, and I don't want to be offensive, but I think they don't think about it as the package deal. They think about it
Mhm.
as I I love this woman or I love this man, I'll deal with the kid. If that's how you feel, don't get with that person. Just like you said, if the culture isn't a fit, then don't get with them. Also, if you don't feel excited about being a step parent, in my opinion, don't marry them, because the kids will feel that. They're gonna feel like they're not wanted. So
Do you do you think there's also a component of like a romantic idealism where it's like, I love this person so much, I'll deal with the kid, and then once you're in it, it's like not reality anymore, and it's like you feel like the kid maybe sabotaged the relationship. Do you feel that too?
yeah, I think so. I think some people might feel that way, and I think that gets shown in movies where they villainize it in that way all the time too. But I think you can never completely. I mean, you do have to have a separate relationship with your husband and spouse. But what I'm saying is, from day one, for me, it was a package deal. I
Mm-hmm.
recognize, and that's the other thing. Like my husband, some women would have an issue if they felt like the husband doesn't choose them over the kid or doesn't put them first. I don't want that. The kid's always first. Normal dating is like you meet someone, you're each other's world, you're always the first priority. When you're dating someone with a kid and then you eventually marry them, you kind of have to ditch that whole notion.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay though. You still love you. You're still going to get all these amazing things, but it's complicated.
And you need to be at least an open or mature emotional EQ, IQ if you're going to step into something like this. Interesting. That I think this podcast is going to give so much value to so many
Hope so.
future. But now, but I guess my question to you then is, are you saying it's okay then if a person after hearing this they're like, I was dating this person with a kid, yeah, this is not for me. Is that okay?
Yeah. Because I think in the long run, you're hurting not just yourself. Again, you're being selfish. If you go into this and you don't really want to be a mom, you cannot be a step parent and not be a parent. That there's parent is in the word. I think you cannot have it one way or the other. You are a part of the family. If you,
But Emily, what if that person is the person of their dreams?
it's not the person of your dreams if you don't want to be a parent.
Yeah, I love
Sorry.
that.
I
Yeah.
don't believe in fairy tales anyway, but fairy tales are bullshit. But it's not just about love. And you can love someone and they're not the right person for you to be with if you cannot accept all of them.
Yes, 100% agree. Yes,
So sorry if I killed somebody's dream, but
you probably did, but it's fine. I think it's for the better good. Emily, you're tough. Great, I love it. Good.
I'm not sorry. They can get over it. Final takeaway conclusion. So, step parents, they can be part of someone's healing or someone's hurt. We talked kind of both ways. It does take a lot of effort. And really, why I wanted to talk about this on Love Means Business is it's love. Bottom line, you have to build that love, that trust, that love has to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Any final words from you before I completely conclude this?
Yes, I would say. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. But a step parent is never neutral. A step
Okay.
parent can be a bridge to good, to safety and growth and help and beautiful things, or they can also be a barrier, right? That damages the kids' self-esteem, their trust, their self-worth, and give them anxiety, right? So it's all about consistency, being there every single day, right? This is not about biology or faith, but it's about behavior. The step parent
Yeah.
has to be there every single day, and he will make an impact. He or she, they will make an impact.
How can people get a hold of you if they want to connect with you further?
So they can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, right?
Okay.
I talk about different things on my LinkedIn channel. I'm also on YouTube. But my channel is in Spanish though; it's not in English, so I do
Oh,
content in Spanish there. But yeah, but the best way to reach me is through LinkedIn. Just DM me. I answer everybody. And yeah, so and the book is on Amazon. Pepito and the Dangerous Cats.
well, thank you for being on here, and thank you
Thank
everyone
you.
for listening and watching this episode. Make sure you subscribe and or follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify so you never miss a new episode of Love Means Business. Also, make sure to follow us on social media for more behind the scenes content and highlights. Remember, love is a powerful force that will impact your life in many different ways. Never let the bad overshadow the good. Keep loving, learning, and leveling up. Until next time.